this is the first day and point in executing the MOU with the college. This time we are going to have him for simulation center and simulation programs. Dr. Ghayoumi is a professor of surgery, cardiovascular surgery at the University of British Columbia. He is a director of fellowship program at the Center of Excellence for Simulation Education and Innovation. He is a founder of Can Health, which you are going to know during our day. He is a chair technology enabled learning for Vancouver, Canada Health, regional director of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. And he serves as an advisor to international education and healthcare organizations. He serves as an expert in the board of directors and advisory board of many companies and non-for-profit organizations such as King Saud University, Dammam University, King Abdullah Medical City, Saudi Ministry of Health, Saudi Commission for Health Education, and others. In the year 2014, he formed Can Health, a Canadian non-for-profit organization that aims to equalize health education between the developed and developing countries using state-of-the-art technology, and he's here now for this purpose. Unfortunately, he got sick in Cairo about 4 days ago. This is how the time is disturbed for us. Dr. Ghayoumi, thank you very much for coming again, and thank you very much for the help. Thank you.
Well, is that okay? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I will get,
okay.
So you can get few words, and then I will save the program.
Okay. Dr. Tayyib Abdurrahman, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to cordially thank every one of you. Is that okay? First of all, I would like to cordially thank every one of you, particularly Nazik and Marouche, who worked very hard for my trip to come here and spend a few days with you. I'll be here today and tomorrow, and we're going to discuss a few issues and clarify a few issues with respect to the MOU that is signed between the Specialization Board and the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. I am one of the regional directors of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, and my region is Middle East, Sudan, and Russia. So it's very diverse. So it is kind of my responsibility from the, as a regional director from the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada to support this project. Having said that, there are issues that college may have a conflict of interest with. For example, our Royal College is a licensing and accreditation body. So they go around the world and now domestically and now internationally accredit institutions for their educational programs and educational activities. However, they have no right to assist people getting to the accreditation, because if they do that, they become a judge and the jury, and it's the conflict of interest. So therefore, the Royal College have partnered with Can Health International so that Can Health International can do the support of building the capacity in a country that applies for accreditation, and then the Royal College will become and do the accreditation as an independent body. So that's the first question that you might have in your mind. What is Can Health, and what's the relationship of Can Health with the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada? And that's what it is. So Can Health International is non-for-profit charitable Canadian organization that aims to equalize medical education between the developing and developed nations using a state-of-the-art technology. So what we committed ourselves to do is to actually modernize the medical education and bring the state-of-the-art knowledge and technology that is developed in the West into the developing nations. So we have contracts with many countries. Sudan is one of them. We are having contract with Nepal, with Vietnam, with Afghanistan, with Iran, with Egypt, and other countries. I am very enthusiastic about working with Sudan, and the reason for that is that when I was here last time, I found the Sudanese people very open-minded, very open, with open heart and open mind, and also it was a pleasure for me working with every one of you, and that's why this Sudan project is close to my heart, because I know I am working with outstanding human beings that I'm really looking forward to. In this process, I'm not here to teach you things. I'm here to have an exchange. I'm here to learn from you, and you're going to maybe learn something from me. We are in an exchange of information. So I do not like to take much of your time and talk about other aspects in this introductory period, but if you have any question in your mind in relation to that, I can answer your questions now. If you don't have, then we're gonna go into our first lecture, which is in relation to simulation as a new dimension in medical education. So please go ahead if you have any question in relation to Royal College, accreditation, Can Health, and why I am here.
With the first talk about introduction to simulation and simulation programs, this workshop is preparing our staff for the simulation center. Luckily, we have the fund for building the center, and we have a fund for starting the equipments, so preparing the people, and then we are going to start soon building the center. So, Dr. Ayumi.
Okay. Thank you. So, shall we start then?
Yeah.
I think it's, so can you make this a little bit, so I can put it in here so I don't hold it in my hand like a, okay. Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to have my hands free so I can talk. Okay. So, are you familiar with simulation and health education? How many of you have been in a simulation program or in a simulation session before? How many? Like, just can you raise your hands? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So many of them. So many of you have been in a simulation program and in a simulation. That's very good. So what do you think? I'm saying here simulation, a new dimension in medical education. How many of you think that simulation is new? How many of you think that simulation is old? Is it new or it's old? Old. So 3 people says it's old. The rest of the people are not decided, right? Well, it depends on how we're gonna define simulation. If you go to the literature, there are many definitions of simulation. One simple definition that is very close to my heart, it says, simulation is modeling in action. Simulation is modeling in action. If we accept that simulation is modeling in action, then simulation is very old. So you can see that people from in Greece, Egypt, maybe in Africa, in the history of mankind, everywhere people used models to explain certain aspects of education, medical education. So in that regard, it's not only in medicine, but also in other areas. For example, chess game. Chess game is a modeling in action. It's a simulation. People learn war strategies through chess. So although there is a dispute between Iranians, you know, the Indians and in Chinese about the origin of chess, who has invented the chess, but it doesn't matter. It is a game, but it's a simulation game. So in that regard, simulation has been used not only for medicine, but for other things. The other type of simulation, what do you think? Role play, theater is a simulation. Every production of Shakespeare is a simulation of human behavior. But Macbeth is probably a very good example of the simulation of human behavior. So, but when it comes to the simulation in medical education, I was once in Saudi Arabia asked by someone to give a lecture on surgical techniques, past, present, and future. And I did that lecture, and I published it actually, it's published. And this lecture made me to go back into the literature and find out in the past who were the best surgeons who did a lot of good things, a lot of good surgical techniques. And I found that this Indian guy by the name of Shashruta of Banaras, Banaras is a city in India, and Shashruta was his name, who lived 600 years before Christian. He invented a lot of surgical instruments. He did a lot of surgical surgery and surgical technique, particularly for the face and breast reconstruction surgery and a lot of other surgeries. So the Shashruta was truly an inventor and also an outstanding doctor. In fact, Shashruta is like Hippocrates for India. Is a father of medicine in India. And aside from all the other innovations that he did, Shashruta was also a very good teacher. He was always with his students. Young people were always around him, and he was always supporting the youngsters. Now, in his book, Shashruta did not only do things, but he also documented. He wrote things 600 BC. So he wrote a very good book, which translated in English and Arabic also. It's called Shashruta Samahita. So in this book, Shashruta wrote that no student should touch a patient unless they practice the surgical skills on fruits and vegetables. What it means to you? Low fidelity simulation. So Shashruta did not only do simulation 600 BC for medical education, but he also clearly documented that no student should do surgery without practicing it on fruits and vegetables. However, when we are talking about the introduction of technology in medical simulation, that is something new. That is not old. And it came from aviation industry. When you look these beautiful airplanes are flying all over synchronously, nicely. They did not always flew like that. Some of them were landed on one wing and still do. Some of them went through the buildings intentionally or unintentionally. Some of them scared people on the ground. So if you look at the statistics of if you look at the statistics, actually before 1950, 40% of the airplanes who went to the skies, they fell down again. And then slowly, as you can see, it's improving, and today it's very negligent. As 0.03% is falling down, although the number of flights exponentially increased. Now, people can argue that, and rightfully can argue, that it's not only the simulation, but airplanes are getting better, more aerodynamic, airports are getting better, the towers are getting better, the engines, the electrical system of the airplanes, everything is getting better. Yes, true, but nobody can deny also the introduction of simulation into the aviation industry at this particular point. So right now, about 80% of a curriculum of a pilot is on a simulator. 20% is not on a physical simulator. From that 20%, only 5% is lectures. The other 15% is online simulation. So the aviation industry have made it into perfection to use simulation before giving the opportunity or the right to a pilot to fly. You probably have you been inside the simulation cockpit of an airplane? It's amazing. It looks like exactly like an airplane. And of course, it's a mock. It's a small little booth. You get inside, and you think that you are in an airplane. And actually, it simulates shaking. It simulates flying out and in, and gravity of the land, and everything. And then in the windows, the software would display any city you want, anywhere. I have flew one of those. It's really amazing technology. It's very advanced technology. Now, my question is now, coming to simulation and health education, if people 600 BC said that you should not allow a student to touch a patient without simulation, and with the development of technology that the aircrafts are so advanced and people are not doing anything, allowing even people to go to the cockpit of the airplane without completing certain hours of simulation, why we allow our students to go to the patient and do whatever they want, and we can say to the patient, oh, that's okay, they're students, they need to learn somewhere, so you are a subject. So this is, we can talk about this later on how bad it is, but I think it's time to change the attitude of medical education, of patient being the subject of learning. Now, when we come to the classical medical education, there is 3 important methods. It's chalk and talk, which is lectures that I'm giving to you right now. It is reading books and giving assignments and so on. And there is see one, do one, teach one, apprenticeship model, we call it. See one, do one, teach one. And a friend of mine called this see one, do one, kill one. So let's see how this is effective. If we are going to shower students all day long, do they learn anything? I will believe that no. In the end of the day, they will tell their parents, I do not learn anything because they don't allow me to learn. They ask me to just listen to them all day long. So aside from the anecdotal issues, the national training laboratories in Bettelman, United States, they did scientific research. And they found that the 3 months retention of knowledge, it means retention of knowledge after 3 months is only 5% for lectures. It means that whatever I talk to you today, in 3 months you remember only 5% of it. So for reading is about 10%. For audiovisual is about 20%. And then for discussion groups is 50%, but practice by doing is 75%, and teaching others is 80%. So what it means is that see one, do one, teach one is a good method. So it is not that apprenticeship method is not a bad method. But this see one, do one, teach one apprenticeship model is based on experiential learning, right? So we learn. And the first person who talked about this was John Locke. You know that the English philosopher John Locke, he in 16th century gives this idea of tabula rasa. It means that every human being is born as a clean slate. And whatever they interact with, they learn. As they interact with, they learn more and more. So although John Locke was bringing this theory of environmental theory, it's called theory of tabula rasa, we should understand from this part of the world that he took the idea from a novel that a Arab philosopher by the name of Ibn Tufayl wrote about 600 years before him. This novel is probably you're familiar with. It's called Hayy bin Yaqdan. If you are not, please go ahead and read it. It's a beautiful novel. And this novel was translated in 10th century actually by in Latin, and it's called Philosophus Orthodoxus. So what he did describe in this novel is that a child was raised, lost from a human being, and he was raised by a deer. And then he slowly interacts with the environment, he learns from the environment, and finally he gets interaction with the human being, and then how the human being was surprised that he not being surrounded with other human beings, how much did he learn? So that the environment did learn. So it's environmental theory of learning. So that's what it was done by, and actually John Locke is admitting that. John Locke is saying that Ibn Tufayl was giving him a spiritual ahead to find this environmental theory. You also know about Abu Ali ibn Sina, probably more than me, right? Abu Ali ibn Sina was not just a doctor, but he was also a philosopher, he was a poet, he was an astronomer, he was a Renaissance man. He had all the talents. But he was also a good pedagogue. So he actually revolutionized pedagogy at that time, because before Ibn Sina, people were giving students to one person. It was a apprenticeship model, as we talked. So people would take 1 or 2, 3 students, and then they go by many years with that student to teach them certain things. But what Ibn Sina came and said that classroom is important, and there are specific values in classroom, as is a competition, it's a group discussion, debates among students that makes the students more understanding the subject. But one of the important things is emulation or simulation. People simulate each other or emulate their teacher, so they're role models, right? So simulation becomes an important issue by everyone. But actually, theory of learning by doing in modern time was clarified by Piaget, a Swiss pedagogue. And he gave the theory of constructivism. What Piaget said is that learning is secondary to and dependent upon progressive reorganization of cognitive function. To teach, Piaget said, is not to reshape behavior, but to provide the environment for students to self-explore. So with the theory of constructivism, you have to provide the environment for students to explore from their inside their learning opportunities. Vygotsky, another Russian pedagogue at that time, agreed to the theory of constructivism, but he was a little bit differ from Piaget, because he was saying that learning is a social event. You cannot assume that a person can sit down in a corner of a room with a computer or a toy and you will learn something. Learning is in interaction, like Ibn Sina said. You learn from each other. You have to learn in a classroom. But today, as you know, computers are becoming the most important social creatures, because you can have a class not only in your premises here, but you can have a class that consists of members from the whole world. You can have this kind of class, right? So now computers are helping this social constructivism. Let's turn the table now from the deep philosophical issues behind learning by doing and coming to a practical sense. So how do you think that competent clinicians use their knowledge and experience to make diagnostic decisions or management decisions? Research has shown that there is 4 types of thinking. The first level is empty mind, reduced thinking. It's when the student doesn't know nothing about it and you ask him a question, you try to manipulate you try to say something, but he has no idea what he's talking about. And then there is dispersed thinking. Is the student learn a few things on the last 3 days before examination, and then you ask him question, he has patchy ideas about things, but he really doesn't have understanding of what's going on, right? And then there is elaborated thinking. So elaborated thinking is actually deductive reasoning. So what it is that when we teach students, clerks, or residents to ask the chief complaint, and then the history of the illness, and then the history of the person, and then the history of the disease, and then the family history, and then all those other things. So, so slowly, through deductive reasoning, we can come to a conclusion what is wrong with this patient, right? So that is a long process. Of course, the students learn that, but they need an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours sometime to put things together through deductive reasoning to find out what's wrong. But what doctors are working is on the basis of compiled thinking. What compiled thinking is based on recall, recognition, memory. What it means that if a doctor is seeing a patient, like 500 patients with flu, so he got so much experience with a patient, or malaria, so got so much experience with this disease that the next time a patient comes to the doctor, within 5 to 10 minutes, asking a few questions, giving the diagnosis and treatment. Some people may think, oh, the doctor is ignorant toward me. He just spends 5 minutes. But it could be that the doctor is not ignorant. The doctor has enough experience to come to this conclusion faster, right? And this conclusion is based on recall, recognition, memory. Why? It's because if you've seen a lot of patients like that, then you don't go through deductive reasoning. You go to your memory and find out neurons that are that recognizes the similarities, and then you recall and recognize the pattern. Once you recognize the pattern, then you make your diagnostic in decisions, in management decision. This theory of recall, recognition, memory is actually explained by theory of transfer of learning. But before I'm going to start talking about the transfer of learning, you have to understand that there is a difference between transfer of knowledge and transfer of learning. Transfer of knowledge is from one person to another person. Like right now, we are in transfer of learning. I am giving you a lecture, you learn from me, and then you have a feedback to me, and I'm learning from you. So it's from person to person. Transfer of learning, on the other hand, is from the same person to the same person. How our prior experience affect our new experience. That is called theory of transfer of learning. And the first person who described this theory was Hafting in 1892. And he said conceptualization of the recall and recognition. So what this theory says, it's very simple, is that if there is an event A occurs with us, and then event A would give, stores inside our brain an internal representation. And then it also have an internal response to that representation, and that's why we do the behavior. So what it means is like, if I never seen a glass I didn't know what to do with it, somebody gave me a glass, and then they teach me to drink water with it. So I took the glass and I look at it and I get the memory. I got the storage of the glass in there. The response is that I can drink water. And I just go and drink water from that. Next time when I see the glass, nobody has to explain to me what to do with it, right? I take the glass and I drink water. Okay? So this is how Hafting explained this theory of transfer. Now, later on, people start thinking in expanding this theory of transfer into different categories. The one category, if the event 1A is exactly the same as the event, second event, event B, then yes, the transfer occurs. And it's called environmental theory of transfer. Or it is called theory of identical elements. Okay? But people start asking questions, what about if the second encounter is not exactly the same as the first one? What then our brain react, okay? So here, if you say, if the A did the stored response and also the behavior, observed behavior, but what if the A asterisk is not exactly the same as A? Would our brain respond to that? If the brain responds to that, then what's the mechanism behind it? How did it respond? So people came to a cognitive theory of transfer. So according to the cognitive theory of transfer, it dictates that when the encounters occurs, it goes to our sensory perception, and then to short-term memory, and then to long-term memory. And then in the long-term memory, we are forming semantic network. What it is, it's the formation of some nodes in pathways from neurons that have the pattern that we are encountered with. Okay? Now this pattern, when the new encounter occurs and it's different, but there are similarities to that, then our brain is able to just go and find the similarities of the pattern, not the exact pattern, but the similarities of the pattern, and then based on that build a new pattern. So that is called cognitive theory of transfer. Particularly in medical education, Dr. Chang in 1993 actually explained that into the training of medical education, and particularly experiential learning, hands-on training, how it occurs. So it has different stages. So it's go through the stages of development, from orientation to coaching to tuning and to routinization or solidification. Okay. Now, let me give you an example to understand what this is all about. Assuming that you're teaching students knot tying technique, right? And your students never was exposed to surgical knot tying technique. But your student was tying his shoelaces all the time, right? Every day, right? So he knows how to tie shoelaces, but he doesn't know how to do surgical knot. So when you start your student here in orientation talking about surgical knots, when you show him, his brain gets the similarity of that, oh, I did tie my shoelaces like this, right? And once you get the similarities, then you start with the new information that the teacher brings about surgical knots, the new neurons in new pathways opens to that already existing network. So, and then once the students start practicing in the teachers start coaching them, take their hands and do that. So some of the neurons, some other neurons and pathways opens, some of the neurons and pathways solidifies like this one in here. And then once the student practice this like 1,000,000 times with a pillow at home and a chair everywhere, then what happens is that more and more solidification of neuron attached to this happens, and up until it becomes is routine. So he goes into the, when you see a surgeon in the OR doing 500 knots very fast and not thinking about it, it's because he is into solidification. So his nodes are working automatically. Okay? So where simulation comes and education. So what we do right now, we can talk about this later on. In simulation, actually, you can, these 3 stages you can do in a laboratory condition. Before a patient, a student sees a patient and practices on a patient. So we're not saying that simulation would replace clinical encounter, that students would never see patients. No, without a patient, there is no education. There is no medical education without patients. But however, to prepare students to the point that they can just go to the ward and be more confident about what doing and give less harm to the patient. So there's a lot of different taxonomies for transfer. I don't want to waste your time on that. But let's come back now, having this philosophical and theoretical background of understanding about experiential learning and about transfer of learning and about learning by doing and all that. Let's apply that and see how it relates to the residency training program, to our education. Now, if you look at the theory of see one, do one, teach one, you remember? What see one, do one, teach one does, it improves experiential learning, right? And then experiential learning affects your compiled thinking, and compiled thinking would improve your medical practice, right? That's the idea. But what would happen now? Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very kind. You guys are always very kind and considerate. That's what I love very much. I apologize, I'm so sick. Sometimes my brain doesn't even function. I just talk. But I hope if you have any questions, we can clarify it later on. So what would happen as a result if we do the classical apprenticeship model? What will happen is that it's very difficult to apply actually classical apprenticeship model of C1, D1, teach one, because patient availability. If a student is coming for 3 months into my cardiac unit, and in the curriculum, I have to teach the student about heart transplant. What about if there is no heart transplant in 3 months, right? So you will not learn anything, right, except learning it from the books. And it's also the ethical issues and legal issues. We didn't have the choice in the past to allow students to go to the bedside and deal with patients directly. But still, we were very careful. We were very careful so that the student would not harm the patient. So that's why the residency training program is taking 4 years or 5 years, is because slowly we would like them to take their hands and slowly allow them to deal with patients, right? So as a result, what would happen that with this kind of classical apprenticeship model, you would have a very unsafe environment, very inefficient because it's very slow to progress. It's unethical if you let the people to do harm to the patient. It's costly also because it's longer, and the cost of medical errors are a lot actually. And it's also unreliable because you cannot always have the same amount of patients or the same pathology at the ward when you need it. So what we are proposing now, that if you change the apprenticeship model into C1, simulate 100, and then do one and teach one, then it will be totally different. So what we are saying, this 100 is just a number. Don't worry about it. Don't have to do 100. So then the simulation would give you the experiential learning before you touch any patient. So you develop your combined thinking for recall, recognition, memory in the laboratory condition before you go and do medical practice. So as a result, what would happen is that if you go into take students into the laboratory condition and make them to learn how to suture, how to tie, how to do this, and how to talk to the other patients, and so on and so forth. So you can do this in a laboratory condition very fast. So as a result, you bring the students very fast to the competency level that you can let them do and the ward work more independently. So as a result, you will have a safer environment for the students and for the patients. It's very ethical, it's less costly, and it's more efficient, and it's more reliable because you can simulate anything you want at any time. Let me tell you a little bit also from yesterday's discussion. I figured out that people may be confused on what simulation is. Simulation environment is not just a simulator. When you build a simulation center and you have a simulator, you go and buy a simulator, it doesn't mean that you have simulation environment. Because in simulation environment, you need a curriculum, a scientifically sound curriculum. You need an expert in the field to be there all the time. You need an assessment methodologies and research attached to your simulator. You need an infrastructure that supports. You need staff to support. The simulation specialists, IT people to support this. You need a governance model. So all these things you need in order to say that you have a simulation program. Let me talk to you a little bit about the problems in medical education. But before I talk to you about the problems in medical education, I would like to tell you the problem about education as a whole, from K to 12 to universities to medical and non-medical. It's because the biggest problem is that the education always should have a balance between the efficacy and innovation. Efficiency, innovation. Now, our programs from K to 12 to universities and medical schools everywhere is based mostly on efficiency, not on innovation. Why I'm telling you? Because we examine, people examine, and the only way they can move forward is by examining them, right? So we are very efficient. Our system is based on efficiency, on exams, but not on innovation. If I'm a surgeon, probably some of you in the audience are surgeons, and when somebody comes to my OR and assisting me, a student, and he try to do things differently, I'll go, don't do that, don't do that, do it exactly the way I wanted to do it. So there is no other ways except my way or the highway, right? That's the attitude we have. We don't give the student the opportunity to innovate, to think. So the same thing even in high school. So as a result, what happens that we make people ready for exams, but not ready for life. When a person, when a doctor graduates the Faculty of Medicine, he deals with patient, with society. He has to think differently and innovatively every 5 minutes. But he's not trained to do that. He's trained to be very good at exams. So this is the major problem in general with education. But there are two major problems specifically with medical education. One is that a gap between the theory and practice of medicine. We are very good at delivering theories. We have been doing this for many years, right? We are very good at delivering theories. And then we give lectures, we give assignment to the students and so on, and then we ask them to go and see a patient. So how can from a book a person go and see a patient? So there is a huge gap between theory and practice of medicine. And this gap can be felt with simulation. So we're not saying that you do not have to do only simulation, you do not teach theory. No, you teach theory. But after the theory, you give the opportunity for the students to learn things in the laboratory conditions, safe environment, before they go into the clinical practice. So they are ready for clinical practice. So the second major problem in medical education is that we are all individually trained and individually credentials, doctors, nurses, allied health professionals, right? But when we graduate from our schools, nursing schools, medical schools, then we come to the hospital and we are asked to perform as a team member. So how can I perform as a team if I never was in a team? I never was trained in a team. So simulation, this is a huge gap right now, is between the individual training and between team training. And with simulation, actually we can build the bridge between individual training and in team training. So from the first day, the students, nurses, doctors, allied health professionals, everybody can work together on the same patient as a team. So when they come to the hospital, they're ready to go and work as a team. This bridge that you build between theory and practice, or between individual training in team training, this is built from different breaks. So I can introduce you all those type of breaks that is used for building this bridge. It's not one size fit all, okay? Simulation is used now in every aspect of life, in military, in police forces, in judiciary system, in law, and everywhere. In police force, for example, police force, in the past, they were asking the policeman to hit 10 bullets in the heart of a paperman in a condition, right? In a laboratory condition. And if he hits 10 bullets, and they say, okay, well, here's license for you. You can now go and be a policeman. But that policeman, when he was going out on the streets, it's not a laboratory condition. The cars are running around, the buses, a pregnant woman with a child is running, and the thief who robbed the bank also has a gun and shooting at him. So this did not help him to just have the target. So the skills only cannot really make you competent to learn the skill. You have to learn the skill in a specific environment. Okay? Same thing with medicine. So therefore, giving that example to you, I can explain to you now what type of breaks you have to use in order to build that bridge between theory and practice and individual training and in team training. So the first break is scale training, scale-centered simulation. That is something that I have been asked also that people are confused a bit. So scale-centered simulation is you can have individual scales obtained in a laboratory condition from anything you can want, from knot tying to suturing to cutting to reading X-rays to anything you can think of. As an individual, you can sit down and learn specific skills like lumbar puncture, anything, IV catheter, anything any skills that is needed. There's about 52 competencies in medical school in Canada, and all 52 competencies you can do in a laboratory condition. Okay, but this is not enough. Having just skill is not enough. You have to know how to use that skill in a context of a patient. So that's what we call patient-centered simulation. Okay? And then how to use that skill in a team, as a team, you know, with nurses and everybody else together, make decisions, move forward. And now also how you can stand here for doctor-patient society, how you can talk in simple words, how you can talk with the patient's relatives about his injury or whatever, about his future, his prognosis. Now, what we did in the past in Canada is we teach students suturing techniques. So this is vertical mattress, this is horizontal mattress suture, this is continuous suture, this is that, and that's, once they learn that, we told them, okay, it's fine, now you're okay. But now we don't do that. Now, the first stage in the laboratory condition, in the simulation center, we teach them how to do vertical mattress suture and the simple interrupted suture, continuous suture, and all that. Then what we do is we take a piece of plastic and or a piece of meat from an animal and put on the shoulder or on the thigh or on the back of a human being, an artist. Okay? So the artist would act like he is drunk or he is a bad person, and he would throw everything out and call names, you know, like real patient, you know, like real patient in a real environment. And so the student has to deal now with his attitude, with his wound that's bleeding, and his relatives that's sitting on the side and saying, hey, doctor, if you don't know, call somebody else, you know, like, what are you doing? So those are the kind of patient-centered simulation that we do. And the team training, now we have to have a nurse on the side, we have to have another the emergency physician on the side to see how this student can deal with the team on doing just that suture. Just suturing is not important. Now, then he can go and talk to the relatives of the patient, how dangerous that is and how long the patient can stay, is going to survive or not, and what to do and what the next steps are. So, simulation is not about learning the skills. Please remember that. Simulation has a huge horizon from learning the skills to talking to the patient's relatives. You can simulate anything you want. You can simulate pharmacy issues. You can simulate hospital issues. You can simulate anything you want. As I said, simulation is a big, huge thing right now in judiciary system. They make courts with simulated courts for students to learn. The lawyers and the police force. You know that there's war all over the world, and the United States is in a lot of places doing that. They don't go into any war unless they simulate that at home. Any war, any situation. They go to Kandahar, they make the Kandahar in the desert of Philadelphia or Florida or whatever, and they make it, they do 100 times the simulation before they send their soldiers there. Because in that simulation, they can talk to the elderly in the village, they can look at the cultural issues, they can look at the barriers, they can have the ambushes, they can look at a lot of things. So coming back to medicine, when we talk about medical education, don't think that simulation is just something that people can learn how to do an IV or how to do a lumbar puncture or a laparoscopic surgery. No, it's much broader than that, okay? So in general, there are different types of simulation. There is recognized about 4 types of it. It's live simulation, virtual simulation, constructive simulation, and hybrid simulation. Live simulation is when a live person talking to another live person, and that live person is responding to the student or to the doctor. And that is OSCEs, or a very good example of that kind of a simulation. Standardized patient is a good example of that. It's a role play. Role play, you remember Shakespeare, role play? So that is a simulation. So that simulation we can do in medical education. Now, virtual simulation is when a human being acts on a machine and the machine responds back to the human being. And these are mostly virtual simulators, like for laparoscopic surgery, for Euro mentor, for GI mentor, for a lot of things, okay? To task trainers and things. And then there's constructive simulation. Constructive simulation is also, they call it high fidelity, because the fidelity thing is not a good idea. So low fidelity, high fidelity is a very relative understanding. But constructive simulation is when a person, a human being, acts on a machine, but part of that machine acts on another part of the machine and respond, and then go to another part of the machine and respond, go to another part of the machine and respond. So it's a very complex. If you change, for example, in a mannequin, the carbon dioxide, their heart rate would change there. So the student has to now look at the heart rate, and then look at the respiratory rate, and look at the saturation of oxygen, and so on and so forth. So it's a very that's called constructive simulation, when you have several responses from the same machine accordingly. And then there's the hybrid simulation. Hybrid simulation is the same as I mentioned to you before as an example of suturing, right? So when you put the suture material on the top of a human being, then it is very good method, particularly for sensitive understanding and learning of sensitive areas. For example, for obstetric and gynecology. So there is a mannequin, and it's also cheap. It's also, you don't need to spend a lot of money. You can train artists to act like a pregnant woman that gives birth, but between the leg of the artist, you put the machine. Once you cover it, you don't see that it's not the same woman. So the woman can scream and shout, and the machine can give the birth. Same things with urology, with catheterization, with a lot of other things. So hybrid simulation is a very effective way to simulate, in a very cheap way to simulate. Okay? So that's the hybrid simulation. Let me talk in the end a little bit about the research. Simulation opens a whole new area of research for you. There is 2 types of research you can do in a simulation lab. The innovative research, you can develop software, hardware, you can develop mannequins, you can develop new machines, you can develop, the area is open. My students, every day, they develop new ways of doing things, right? Then there is, aside from innovative research, you can do educational research. But educational research is actually mandatory for accreditation. And what that is, mainly it's about efficacy, reliability, validity, and cost effectiveness. So any curriculum, any program you develop, you want to make sure that it's reliable. You want to make sure that this is valid. You want to make sure that it's effective. If you don't prove that it's better than it was before, then there is no point doing it, right? And also if you show that it would save money or in the long run or in the short run. So these are the environments that you can actually do a lot of research, and it's very open. It would bring your organization into a different stage. This give you an example on basic surgical techniques that we did research. This is like an efficacy research. You can see that how effective it is to do simulation. We also have developed, and we are in the process of developing a new software, and it's called CyberPatient. It's an award-winning software where you can have the patient in the cyberspace, and you can do the continuum of care from admitting patient to the hospital to asking questions about the history of the patient, do physical examination of the patient, and you can do, go to the treatment of the patient, to the OR or post-op treatment, and so on and so forth. And it also has a intelligent tutoring system involved, so that in the end it gives the student what kind of mistakes he made and what he should do next time to not do it. So these kind of, this we developed in the year 2000, and now we are doing the version 2, the second version, in the process of doing it. We spend a lot of money on that. But the version 1 was studied in Japan. We did a study in Japan. We had three groups of students. We had a huge group of students. We divided into 3-4 groups, and then one group went to CyberPatient, learned through CyberPatient. The other group was learning through books, the same material, same exact material. And the third group was doing nothing, was a sham, like just going home. So we did ASCII examination and multiple choice examination before, and ASCII and multiple choice examination after. It was very interesting to see that the students that were working with computers instructions, after 2 hours, they were working with each other, and they're trying to understand, and they were laying down on the floor and testing on each other different methods. But students who were working with the book, within 15 minutes, they were bored, they were not concentrating, they were going out, or doing a lot of other things. So here, these students were leaving their computers and were just practicing on each other within no time. So they had a lot of fun, but it was not just a fun. We published this in the Journal of Medical Education in England, which is one of the toughest journals to publish things as an innovative ideas. And what we found is that the group that was using CyberPatient were significantly did better than the group that did use just books, just the textbook, right, in reading. But moreover, what I did is I asked them, it was in 2 universities, in Kochi and Jichi. So I asked the dean of both medical schools to give me overall performance of those students during the year. And I plotted that, and I found that the students who were excellent students, overall rate is excellent. It didn't matter if they were in the textbook or in the CyberPatient, they always did well. And it's only 10% of the population. The other 90% who did mediocre or very bad in the medical school, with the CyberPatient, they made a very good progress. Which means that there is no stupid people, there are just stupid methods to teach. So different people are learning by different methods, okay? We can talk about that maybe some other time. But also it opens research to areas that you may not be able to do in the past. Like sleep deprivation. How can you study the sleep deprivation, the effect of sleep deprivation of residents on patients? It's a crime, right? You cannot do that. But on a mannequin, yes, you can do it. So we did actually, and we published. And guess what? 24-hour deprivation of sleep deprivation of students are equivalent to 2 bottles of wine if they were drinking to come to the next day to work. So those kind of research you also can do. Now, at this point, I don't want to take much more of your time. I think I tried to reach the learning objectives I put forward, which I explained to you about the background of simulation. You probably understand now a little bit more about simulation and health education, educational philosophies, simulation values, why we do simulation and how we're going to do it, simulation integration into the curriculum, and simulation research. So if you have any question, please do not hesitate to ask me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this philosophical and historical lecture on innovative medical education. Any comments or questions? Professor Bashir Hamad.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah. Thank you very much. This was a very enlightening talk, and we learned a lot from it. And it really took us back to the origins of the whole thing. We did not realize that before. Everybody always was thinking that this thing was quite new, coming with the new approaches in medical education and so on. Also, we learned a lot from your review of the learning theories. But I don't know, we have not touched on some of them which might have some relation to or relevance to simulation. Behaviorism, I don't know whether it is relevant or not. And adult learning theory, for example, if you like to comment later on this.
Yeah.
I think the fact that simulation covers a lot of areas. Also, I think people should realize this, that it is not just in the skills laboratory or so. And when we think about establishing skills laboratories for our, say, undergraduate students, one of the main obstacles to that from the administration usually is that the cost is high. And I see you have said that it is cost effective. So how do we defend that? I think this is one area I'd like to hear your views about it. In relation to the vast area, the connection between simulation and improvement of education, you have mentioned two main areas as problems of medical education, or just let me call it health professional education. The fact that the focus on theory rather than application, and that's very common. But nowadays it is being actually, this gap is being bridged, and I would like to link it up with team individual work or teamwork. If we take one of the areas where simulation was used, like problem-based learning, I think that's an area now that's coming to the scene of medical education, and it's also a simulation. We give the students written simulation of a problem, a patient problem or so, and then they work on it together. And this also builds up more of the teamwork. So I think there's some connections which I wanted to just draw attention to them or clarify them in relation to simulation. One little point concerning health education. There is always a confusion about calling medical education, either taking it as a broad sort of approach, that is, medical means everything about medicine and health and so on, or being more specific to say, for example, health education, we say this is health education of the public. And when we come to medical education. If you want to make it more general, we say health profession education. So I think the title health education needs to be more specified in that sense. Thank you very much for this enlightening talk.
You're welcome, no problem.
I learned a lot from you.
Yes, yes.
Respond or?
Yeah, sure. So let me, I'm a little bit behind, so I might not remember you. Just remind me if I forget anything, because you had like multidimensional questions. and thank you very much. Questions are very good and it's very important. First of all, the philosophy. Yes, if you can, I have another lecture about educational philosophies as a whole, which would look into the not only constructivism, but also behaviorism, and also Gestalt theory and all the other theories. But that is nothing to do with learning by doing. So whatever philosophical theories and aspects of philosophy I talked about was related to learning by doing. Which is the constructive theory of Piaget. That's all around that, and whatever historical connection it had, I try to do. But I'll be more than happy to give another lecture another time, or today or tomorrow, whenever you want, about the educational philosophies as a whole. That's a very important, other interesting area that was out of the scope of this lecture. So now the other thing about the team learning, you are asking that you are giving students a case, and then you ask them to work together as in the case. Well, that's mostly sound to me like a problem-based learning. That doesn't sound like a team as a health team. I will talk about health later on. So so when we are talking about the competencies, medical competencies or health competencies, we concentrate more about the team dynamics between nurses, allied health professionals, doctors, in the ward, in the OR, and anesthesiologists, other people like that. So we're not talking about the team dynamics of some students getting together, sitting and resolving an issue. So that would be more a base for problem-based learning, which is a very good way to learn. Actually, it's important. Now there are people, pedagogues around the world are coming out of that problem-based learning and getting more into case-based learning. So there's a little bit of difference between the problem and case-based learning, but it's a collective learning in a group, which is the dynamic of that group is different than the dynamic of a team in the hospital. So that is your question about the health education in medical education. I don't know how you define it here, but in Canada, we distinctly define between medical education and health. Medical education, it relates only to doctors, physicians, and specialists. Health education relates to everyone in addition to doctors. When you say health education, it means from paramedics to allied health professionals, nurses, everybody. So when you are talking simulation, as I said, team dynamics being one of the important factors, and in simulation, we are talking about health education more than talking about medical education. It doesn't mean that we don't have plans or programs for medical education, but we want to include nurses, allied health professionals, and others into the team dynamics. Was there any other questions? I'm sorry if I forgot. The cost effectiveness for
Simulation center.
Oh, simulation center. The cost effectiveness is something that has never been proven that simulation is cost effective. In actual fact, it's not. It's very costly. However, the cost effectiveness of simulation more reflects on the two aspects of residency training program. I talked about only residency training program when we say cost effective, it's not undergraduate. So the two aspects is one is that as I mentioned, we are very careful in slow in the progress of our residency training program because we don't want to harm the patient. So in that slow process, make it very expensive and time consuming. So if you learn all those things in a laboratory condition in 1 year, you would make it more efficient and less costly for people to do that. So that's one thing. So it's an indirect cost effectiveness, not direct cost effectiveness. So the second thing is that, as you know, probably that I'm not saying maybe Sudan is an exception in medical, in healthcare delivery, but in most part of the world, in developed nations, which I call it United States, Canada, Australia, England, the medical errors are about 10.5%. And about 2 to 3% of patients are dying every year in the world because, not in the world, in developed nations because of medical errors. So medical errors is a huge issue in our countries. I'm not talking about Sudan, so I don't know about Sudan, but in my country, it's a huge issue in every country. And we admit that. Before we ignored it and we say, no, there's nothing wrong with us. But now people did the research and they admit that yes, it's more dangerous to go to the hospital than to go downtown Vancouver. It's at least most likely to be harmed in the hospital than in downtown Vancouver. So most of this research has shown that in teaching hospital, there is more harm done. And in Australia, they have measured that, and it's about $40 million per year, the cost of medical errors done by residents and students. It's $40 million per year. So the idea is that if you have a simulation center and you prepare your students in a laboratory condition before they go and they're competent when they go to the clinics, then you would save a lot of money for your country. Aside from the ethical issue, you harm less people and all that, because that's what Hippocrates' oath is, that we don't harm people, but we do harm people. And so the cost effectiveness mostly for that. And I'll give you an example. Government of Australia, because of this cost effectiveness, put $90 million into one simulation center. Just one province put $90 million Australian dollar to build a simulation center to support the hospitals. In addition to that, insurance companies are money makers, right? They're not going to give their penny without, even if I get sick, I have to go in and by force get money from them, right? That's how their businesses. In Maryland and in Washington, D.C., there's a group of insurance companies that has about 12 hospitals, major hospitals around Washington, D.C. They gave $60 million to a private company to build a simulation center for them, for their hospitals. And they said to every hospital, if you are going to use this simulation center, we're going to give you 10% discount on your medical insurance bills. Why? It's because they have received valid information that that simulation center would reduce the cost, would make the system cost effective. So the cost of simulation center is going to be not going to be cost effective. Simulation is a very expensive proposition. but it have a cost-effective effect on the nation, on hospitals, on medical education as a whole, as a system. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any question?
Thank you very much, Dr. Kayumi, again. And really thank you for this very informative lecture. And really we benefit a lot from it. My question is about the holistic approach from within and from without. From within, I mean, is there any study or research saying anything about the simulation being used in the undergrad, and then this being processed for the postgraduate? And this tailored to the research that you have mentioned in chapter. Because you know now this is like Sudan medical specialization, but the main target is the postgraduate.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything that this needs to be really firstly being implemented in the undergrad, and then you continue addressing the core competencies as a postgrad? And if in our case, so there is no, the whole what is we have in the undergrad is about skill-centered simulation, if it is there. The second question is from within or from without, because you mentioned something about the actors. So this is like a holistic approach where we need other professions like the actors and the cognitive simulators to be also having some sort of simulation modules to be taught. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yes, I think it has been said by a lot of people that postgraduate education is a place where you fix undergraduate education. So I don't think that has to be that way anymore, you know? Like, I think if simulation is integrated into the undergraduate curriculum with respect to scales, you know, team, patient-centered, and so on, as it is in ours. Like, for example, when people come to the Department of Surgery, they go to a boot camp. So they just go for a week of doing trauma, emergency medicine, dealing with things, you know, like OR, scrubbing, gowning, gloving, suturing, and all that. So in the same thing in Department of Medicine, they go through heart, cardiology, simulators before they go to the ward. So, there is it's not that in every situation you have to apply all or above or nothing. The integration of simulation into the curriculum needs a very thoughtful design. So for the undergraduate, and I would believe it's important to start with undergraduate so that they will be prepared in the postgraduate education. You don't have to redo things, right? So you prepare your foundation better than, you know, than later on to take care of. So it is important to have to have simulation integrated into the curriculum, and that's probably not a question that I can answer to you right now, but because it's a huge, I have to look at your whole curriculum map, and then I can say where you can put what kind of simulation to support your curriculum. Because simulation is not here to change your curriculum, to make it different. It's just to support where you need to support. It doesn't touch your curriculum, it supports your curriculum. So that is a very important one. And then when it comes to the postgraduate education, then I believe that if your undergraduate is strong, then you don't have to repeat those things in postgraduate. Then you can move forward from there and build on more complex issues to resolve and to teach them. So in my understanding, simulation is an expansive proposition. You don't make simulation centers for undergraduate, for nurses, for postgraduate, for this and for that. You make one strong, good simulation center and use it by everyone, so that everyone is used, the nurses, the undergraduates, postgraduates, they're all using it. And in fact, according to the research I showed to you, teaching others is the best way to learn. So what we do in Vancouver is that we ask the residents to teach medical students in the laboratory condition without any harm to the patient. The beauty of that is that there is no harm to the patient. They can make mistakes, they can do whatever, but they can, yeah. So there are some other tools and technologies that you can use to support. Welcome. Any other questions?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for this fruitful lecture. I would like to ask one question about filling the area of attitude in simulation. Although we are a nurse in nursing, we use in the basic level, which is the skill lab, and we use a model and we simulate some student who do temperature and so on so in the lab. And we use this in assessment when we want to assess the student, especially in critical area. We cannot examine them in the patient, examine them in the simulated area in the lab. But although we teach in the lab about the attitude, explaining the skills to the patient, doing something like this, when the student comes to the model or to his peer student, he forgets this area. It is difficult for us to feel the attitude area in this simulation. Then the next question, I would like you to explain for me more about high-pair type of simulation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. Very good question. I think, yes, you're doing the right thing. Simulation can be used not only for education, but also for assessment. Simulation can be used for a lot of things. Unfortunately, we don't use it very much. I give you just an example. Have you seen anybody, any artist, violinist, right, to go to the stage after a month of vacation without any practice? Have you seen any football player going for 2 months of vacation and then coming back without any practice, playing soccer? You haven't, right? You have, everybody has to practice. Unfortunately, I'm a cardiac surgeon. I go for a month of vacation. I come back and I go to the OR and I sew. I continue sewing, continue cutting. So yes, it could be for not. It could be used. Simulation could be used for anything you want. Okay, and I think in order to change the attitude of students towards simulation, you have to make the simulation environment very realistic and make it very serious. So it's not just playing with dolls, you know. It's a cultural thing. You would slowly get it, but I think the specialization board has outstanding idea on building a very good simulation center. And once this simulation center is built, I promise you, if I do this, because we were preaching from yesterday, that you would have you would be an integral, nursing education will be an integral part of it. And in that, you're going to have a ward. And in that ward, you're going to have a bathroom and beds and in everything else, you know. So you would have all the things that you can have in an environment, in a hospital environment, so that when the student comes, he feels like I am in the. I have seen students crying after the mannequin dies. They get into it so much. It's all about the environment. Okay, the attitude of students is changed, will change when you change the environment and change the method of teaching. So, for simulation, later on we may talk, we didn't go into the depth of simulation. It's not the simulation session by itself that's educational. It's the debriefing afterward that is more educational. So the debriefing process is very important, and we can talk about that. And for that, you have to have special environment to have the debriefing. Okay? So your first question was it okay? You're satisfied? So your second question was about yeah. Oh, thank you. Your second question was about the type of simulation, right? So yeah, as I said, there are different type of simulation. There's life simulation, when a live person is talking to another live person. Okay, like this is standardized patients, OSCEs. Okay, this is live simulation. And then there is a virtual simulation when a person is talking to machine is talking back to the person. And then there's constructive simulation where there's different part of the machine responds in different time intervals to the same person. And then there is a hybrid simulation when you have an artist, you hybrid an artist, a human being, with a machine together, put together, like for birth control, for birth, I mean, particularly in nursing and in midwifery, it's used very, very often. Is that okay?
So it is better to move to the second session.
Shall we?
Before?
No, I mean there are some more questions. That doesn't matter. No,
we're running short of time.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Thank you very much for your valuable lecture. It's just I like your expression about doing post-grad stimulation to fix undergraduate, because as you mentioned in your lecture, this simulation environment, you need a lot of trainers, almost 1 to 4 or 1 to 6 or 1 to 8, and so you need a limited number of trainees. So undergraduate, we have thousands of trainees. Well, they graduate at the end, but the skills is lacking. So making a simulation center with all the simulation environment, though cost effective, that would help in improvement of or fixing undergraduate, because we need this simulation environment. So a lot of trainers and few number of trainers. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I was the chair of the Phase 6 curriculum for medical school, for our medical school. So my responsibility was with a group of professors to develop the Phase 6 curriculum for the medical school, which is the exit curriculum. And I'll tell you, just to confirm what you said, there's 52 competencies that I was supposed to be knowing, and I was having done research all my life, I said, wow, what about if you're going to do a survey and do a research and see how much did they learn? They're an exit. They're just going to be graduated and work independently as a doctor. And guess what? Only 30% of the students had 60% of the competencies in Canada. So it's, sometimes I feel very, like particularly in Saudi, like people, oh, like our students, they know everything. I say, wow, yeah, do you want me to go and get an exam? I mean, being cocky about my program is the best doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't, we have to change things. We have to learn from others, from our own mistakes, but it's better to learn from other people's mistakes. I was shocked I was shocked to see that my students, they are not prepared going out. And they're all with multiple choice question, because what gives the students a diploma? A multiple choice question. Okay, you're going to be outstanding on multiple choice questions, but what about the patients? What about the medical practice? What about if they ask you to put an IV catheter? How are you going to do that? So I think the world is now going out of the theoretical medicine, because in the past, like, we lecture, like a lot of things and a lot of theories and so on. Nowadays, it's more on competency-based education. You got to make sure when the students graduate from nursing school, from medical school, that they're competent of what they're doing. So it's a competency-based education that is, and without a good simulation center, you're not going to be able to do any competency-based education. You can do lectures all day long, but in the end, if you want them to do things, this is how you have to do it. Yeah, thank you.
تياني آخر last تياني.
Again, thank you very much for your again, thank you very much for the nice lecture.
Thank you.
We benefit a lot from that, and we learn a lot. And just asking what the purpose of doing this simulation centers when you look at it. On one side, the purpose is to assist the students, either postgraduate, undergraduate, in the final examinations. But in the other way, we need it for training. So if it is designed for training, it must be a continuous thing. So start from the simple procedures. So it's continuous, so it must be started in the early years of medical school. And this way, and we should look at it to be there in any medical school, and possibly in any hospital, patient hospital. So how can, in this way, is very costly. If that I'm not there from before, and so this be in the future the culture of medical education. If how to educate medical students and postgraduates not just to assess in the final exam, how to do these skills. And if it's so, it must be a continuous thing in the medical schools and hospitals, starting from the early years, from the simple procedures that we did. How do you think of how we solve this problem? Thank you.
Well, I don't believe, a very good question. I don't believe it's a problem. I think this has to be done, and exactly what you said. I'm just repeating what you said. It cannot be sporadic simulation here, there, doing this and that, but you have to do it in a continuous basis, from simple to more complicated, from undergraduate to postgraduate education, from together with nurses and together with everybody. In simulation, one thing you have to understand, in simulation, there is no doctors, nurses, there's a team. Everybody, every member of the team is equally should be respected. So I totally agree with you. It has to be a continuity in it. It cannot be done just in one small little area or two areas. It has to be continuity. Let's say, if we say in the third year, they would do the scale-based simulation. As an example, I gave suturing, learn suturing. In the fourth year, he would suture on a human patient, and a fifth year, you would talk to the patient's relatives, and so on. So you have to bring that the complexity on different type of simulation, different conditions, to make sure. Then, the end point is that you make sure that your student's competent. That's all. You make sure that your student that graduates medical school is competent of doing things, dealing with patients, not doing any harm to patient at least.
to move to the second session or
Sure, whatever you like, whatever the people likes. I don't want. Probably they're fed up with
so
me
because
now.
we are short of time, we move to the second talk about needs evaluation and assessment of the simulation center.